The title of this my story is The Man I Met Online Sold Me for Money. In the heart of Lagos, amidst the bustling streets, there lived a young woman named Nkechi. Nkechi was bright and ambitious, an inspiring entrepreneur who spent her day dreaming of new ventures and nights chatting online with a man named Chukwudi. They had met through a social media platform where Chukwudi's charm had quickly won her over. Months turned into a year of virtual courtship, with Nkechi growing fonder and fonder of Chukwudi's promises. He lived in Abuja and often invited her to visit, but each time she hesitated, citing work or family obligations. Little did she know Chukwudi had his own reason for wanting to meet face to face. One fateful day, Nkechi received a surprise message from Chukwudi. He was moving to Lagos for work, insisted they finally met, made plan for a weekend, and Chukwudi eagerly invited her to stay at his apartment in the heat of Victoria Land. The night arrived, and with butterflies in her stomach, Nkechi hailed a ride to Chukwudi's apartment. She arrived. Chukwudi greeted her warmly at the door, but there was a strange glint in his eyes that Nkechi could not quite place. They spent the evening talking and laughing, but as the clock struck 2 a.m., he brought out a big cutlass and told Nkechi to bring all her valuables out. He collected her phones and all the money with Nkechi with her bag. He threw Nkechi out in the night. Nkechi found herself wandering and crying in the dark, unfamiliar streets of Lagos, her mind racing with confusion. After trekking aimlessly for what felt like hours, Nkechi was suddenly accosted by a group of men emerging from the shadows. Their faces were hidden behind scarves, their intentions clear. Before she could react, strong arms seized her. A cloth was pressed against her mouth, and darkness swallowed her whole. Nkechi awoke to find herself in a small, dimly lit room. The air was thick with humidity, and the smell of damp concrete assaulted her senses. She tried to move, but found her hands and feet bound tightly with rough rope. Panic surged through her veins. As she realized her situation, her eyes adjusted to the dim light. She could make out the faint outlines of the captors in a corner, speaking in hushed tones. They were masked, their faces covered with bandanas, and their voices were low, speaking in a language that Nkechi could not understand. Fear gripped her heart as she struggled against her restraints, her mind racing with thoughts of what they might do to her. Were they planning to ransom her? Were they planning of a larger criminal organization? Questions swirled in her mind, but answers eluded her. Hours passed in agonizing silence, broken only by the occasional murmur of her captors. Nkechi fought against the rising tide of despair, drawing on every ounce of courage she could muster. She had to stay strong, she told herself. She had to find a way out. Just as hope began to wane, she heard footsteps approaching. The door opened, and a figure stepped into the room. It was a woman, older with a stern expression on her face. She spoke to the men in Hausa, her voice commanding and authoritative. One of the men, clearly subordinate to her, nodded and approached Nkechi with swift motion. He cut the ropes binding her hands and feet. Nkechi scrambled to her feet, her muscles stiff from hours of confinement. The woman spoke to her in broken English, her tone gruff but not unkind. "You're safe now, come with us," as she said, gesturing towards the door. Nkechi hesitated for a moment, her eyes dancing between the woman and the men. There was something in the woman's gaze that reassured her, a glimmer of compassion beneath the ardent exterior. Nkechi followed the woman down a series of narrow corridors, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced nervously at the masked man, who trailed behind them, their eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity as she realized she had exchanged one form of captivity for another. They emerged into a larger room filled with a mostly assortment of people, all speaking in hushed tones. Nkechi gazed darted around the room, her mind racing. As she tried to formulate a plan, she was outnumbered and vulnerable, but she could not give up. The woman who had freed her approached a man seated at a makeshift desk, their conversation in Hausa too, rapid for Nkechi to understand. She watched in horror as the man counted a stack of bills and handed it to the woman, who pocketed the money with a satisfied grin. Nkechi suddenly understood the full extent of her predicament. Those people were human traffickers. They intended to sell her to the highest bidder. Fear clawed at her insides, threatening to overwhelm her. She had to find a way out, but the odds seemed insurmountable. Just as despair threatened to consume her, a commotion erupted at the far end of the room. Two men were engaged in a heated argument, their voice rising above the murmur of the crowd. The trafficker's attention momentarily diverted, and Ikichi saw a chance. With a burst of adrenaline-filled determination, she bolted towards the nearest exit. The room erupted into chaos as shouts filled the air and footsteps thundered behind her. She pushed through the door and sprinted down a dimly lit corridor, her heart pounding in her ears. Ahead, she saw a flicker of light emanating from an open doorway. Without pausing to think, Nkechi rushed towards it, praying it would lead to freedom. In a narrow alleyway, flanked by towering buildings, gasping for breath, she glanced around frantically, searching for any sign of where to go next. Her eyes fell on a busy street just a few yards away. With renewed determination, she sprinted towards it, her feet pounding against the pavement. As she emerged onto the bustling street, Nkechi felt a surge of relief. She was free, at least for now. But she knew she couldn't stay here. She had to find help, find a way to get back home. Nkechi ran blindly through the crowded streets, her heart pounding in her chest. She did not stop until her lungs burned and her leg felt like they would give out beneath her. Finally, she stumbled into a quiet alley, leaning against the cool brick wall for support. But her momentary relief was shattered by the sound of footsteps approaching. Before she could react, strong arms seized her from behind, pinning her arms to her side. She struggled against her captors, but they were too strong. Darkness closed in around her as they dragged her into the shadow. When Nkechi regained consciousness, she found herself back in the dimly lit room, her hand and feet bound once again. Pain radiated from her foot, where she had hit it during her desperate flight, and she winced as she tried to move. The woman who led the traffickers earlier stood over her, her expression a mist of frustration and contempt. "You stupid girl," she spat in broken English. "Your lover sold you to her so cheaply. You think you can run away?" Nkechi had sank at the realization Chukwudi had betrayed her. All this time, she had trusted him, believed in him, and he had sold her into this nightmare. "You are lucky we did not kill you," the woman continued, her voice low and dangerous. "Now you go do as we say or you go regret am." Nkechi felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had to stay strong, find a way to escape again. She couldn't give up hope now. Nkechi's heart sank as the woman's words sank in. She had been betrayed, sold by someone she thought cared for her. The traffickers were not merciful. They bound her tightly, and the man among them beat her mercilessly for her failed escape attempt. Bruised and broken, Nkechi was dragged through a series of harrowing events her spirit tested at every turn. Days turned into a desperate blur of confinement and uncertainty. Eventually, she was taken to a dark, windowless room where she was left alone with her thoughts. A week passed before Nkechi was forcefully taken to a bustling port under the cover of the night. Here, amidst the chaos, the trafficker battered her away to another group. The man spoke a foreign language she could not understand, but their gestures and rough handling made their intentions clear. She was stripped of her identity and her dignity, treated as a commodity to be sold. Nkechi felt numb as they roughly inspected her, checking for imperfections like a piece of livestock. Their voice harsh and indifferent in the end. She was sold for a fraction of what she had once been worth. Nkechi was transported to a new location, this time by sea. She was crammed into a small filthy apartment with other captives, their misery a constant reminder of the hell she was enduring. Days turned into weeks, and Nkechi lost track of time. She clung to the hope of escape, but each attempt was met with brutality and further punishment. She endured beating, starvation, and the constant threats of violence. Her spirit broken and her body worn down, Nkechi found herself in a foreign land, far from home, sold into a life of forced labor. She toiled under harsh conditions with hope of escape. Her dream of a better future seemed like a distant memory. As Nkechi's life descended into a nightmare of expectations, she was forced into the most degrading and dangerous work imaginable. Her days were filled with fear and loathing, her nights with unspeakable horrors. She felt the weight of betrayal by Chukwudi and the trafficker who had sold her like cattle. A faint glimmer of hope emerged. One rainy evening, Nkechi found herself in a dimly lit room, her spirit crushed but her will to survive still flickering. A man entered, tall and withered, with eyes that held a sorrow deeper than the ocean. He introduced himself as Emeka, a man who had lost his wife tragically 4 years ago. A friend had recommended the maid agency, hoping it would provide some comfort and assistance. From the moment Mr. Johnson met Nkechi, he was captivated by her beauty, intelligence, and hardworking nature. She spoke with a gentle, melodic dialect that reminded him of his late wife, bringing both comfort and longing to his heart. Nkechi too found solace in Mr. Johnson's kindness. Despite her circumstances, she was treated with respect and dignity. She worked tirelessly, cooking, cleaning, and caring for Mr. Johnson's children as if they were her own. Over the time, over time, a deep bond grew between them. Mr. Johnson found himself confiding in Nkechi, sharing memories of his wife and the pain of his loss. Nkechi listened with empathy, offering comfort and understanding. She began to see Mr. Johnson not just as her employer, but as a kindred spirit who had also experienced great sorrow. As their friendship blossomed into something deeper, Nkechi and Mr. Johnson found themselves falling in love. Their relationship blossomed quietly, with stolen glances and secret smiles. They found joy in each other's company, finding solace in their shared grief and hope for the future. However, the traffickers still lurked in the shadow, watching and waiting for an opportunity to reclaim Nkechi. They were determined to keep their lucrative assets under their control, no matter the cost. One evening, as Nkechi and Mr. Johnson sat together in the quiet of his study, Nkechi found herself overcome with emotion. She knew she had to tell him about her past, about the horrors she had endured at the hands of the traffickers. With sorrow in her eyes, Nkechi recounted her harrowing journey from Lagos to the foreign land, from explosion to servitude. Mr. Johnson listened in stunned silence, his heart breaking for the woman he had grown to love. He held her tightly as she spoke, offering silent support and understanding. After a long moment, Mr. Johnson made a solemn vow to Nkechi. "I will do everything in my power to protect you," he said, his voice unwavering. "No one will ever hurt you again." Determined to keep his promise, Mr. Johnson used his weight and influence to launch an investigation into the traffickers who had brought Nkechi to this foreign land. With the help of law enforcement and international agencies, they tracked down the ring of the traffickers and orchestrated a daring raid. In a dramatic confrontation, the traffickers were arrested and brought to justice. Nkechi stood tall and courageous as he faced her captors, knowing that she had finally reclaimed her freedom. With the traffickers behind bars, Nkechi and Mr. Johnson were free to focus on their future together. Their love had grown stronger through adversity, and they knew they wanted to spend the rest of their lives together. In a beautiful ceremony surrounded by family and friends, Nkechi and Mr. Johnson exchanged vows and became husband and wife. It was a celebration of love, hope, and triumph over adversity. As they danced together at their wedding reception, Nkechi looked into Mr. Johnson's eyes and knew that she had finally found her home. They had overcome unimaginable challenges, but their love had prevailed. Their story was far from over. Though with Nkechi's strength and Mr. Johnson's unwavering support, they would face the future together, hand in hand, with a heart full of hope and gratitude. Nkechi and Mr. Johnson's love story continued to flourish as they settled into their new life together. With Mr. Johnson's unwavering support, Nkechi found healing from her past trauma, and they cherished moments they spent together. As time passed, Nkechi grew homesick for Nigeria, her heart aching to see her family and friends again. Mr. Johnson understood her longing and, with great love, decided to take her back to her homeland. They made plans to visit Lagos, where Nkechi had once faced unimaginable suffering. Upon their arrival in Lagos, Nkechi was greeted with tears of joy from her family, who had feared that they would never see her again. She embraced them tightly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the second chance at life. But Nkechi's journey to closure wasn't over yet. With the help of local authorities and connections Mr. Johnson had made, they launched an operation to track down the traffickers who had sold her into slavery. They discovered that Chukwudi, the man who had sold her, was still involved in the illegal trade. In a daring raid, Chukwudi and his associates were apprehended. Nkechi faced him with a mixture of anger and sadness, realizing that a man she had once trusted caused her so much pain. Chukwudi was taken into custody. They returned to their new home, stronger and more in love than ever. They built a life together filled with happiness, laughter, and support of their loved ones. Years passed. Nkechi and Mr. Johnson lived happily ever after. They cherished each day together, grateful for the love and resilience that had brought them through their darkest days. And so, the story came to a close. Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to click on like and the subscription button below. Have a wonderful day.